All right, welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome everyone. This Q&A question came in, I guess last week or a few days ago. I actually put it up there, and someone asked, how do you know Moses existed? How do you know Abraham existed? How do you know anybody in the Torah, existed? Right. So I want to do that a little bit. So I remember many years ago studying by the conservative movement and took a class in biblical criticism, which they claim either makes you Orthodox or an atheist. So at the beginning, they tell you, the Torah is holy, 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 whatever that means. They tell you at the end, that the Torah is holy. And everywhere in between, they'll tell you the Torah is like, compare it to Hammurabi's codes, compare it to other things, etc., anywhere in between. So I remember one class, this quote unquote rabbi gets up and he says, if Abraham didn't exist, would that stop you from putting on tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call them? Right. So I was half asleep, not really paying attention. And then, I go to eat lunch. Person behind the counter is like, okay, what do you want? And I'm like, what do you mean Abraham didn't exist? And all of a sudden, hit me like a ton of bricks. So I went to speak to my professor and whatever, sort of hashed it out, this and that, since I had more of a, traditional way of thinking for whatever reason, but, I didn't have any information to dispute it because obviously, I believe that God spoke to Moses passed it down, etc. So everyone's going to say, or a lot of people may say, well, isn't that a leap of faith? Don't you really believe, it's a leap of faith? I said, no. Christianity is a leap of faith. Torah is based on knowledge, right? What's the mitzvah to believe God gave the Torah, right? We just read it last week. Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. God says to Moses, saying, Anochi Hashem Elokecho, I'm the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt, took you out of the house of bondage. Very good. Right, very good. So the Chinuch, Sefer HaChinuch, who commentary, where he writes all the mitzvahs in every parsha. So in this mitzvah in Parshas Yisro, he says that's the mitzvah to believe in God. Mitzvah to believe in God is what? From Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. I'm the Lord your God, took you out of the house of bondage. Very good. Right? God intervenes in history. Right? That we understand. They're going to say, but it's not proof. Right? Not proof over here. That Moses existed. Right? So what simple explanation? Right? Someone had posted. What simple explanation? Simple explanation is, when God gave the Torah to Jewish people, how many people did he give it to? Gave it to 600,000 men, the Torah says, between the age of 20 and 60, not including women and children. How many is that? About 2 to 3 million. Now, no other religion, quote unquote, made such a claim. All of JC's, all his miracles were to take place in front of a few people. Muhammad, same thing. No one is going to make such a claim, because you can't make such a claim. Because then people who weren't there say, how do we know? How do we know what happened? Then people say, so even you're going to tell me that the Muslims and the Christians, that's most of the world today, they agree God spoke to Jewish people on Mount Sinai. 100%. They agree. They say, we're not chosen anymore. JC came, fulfilled all the Torah, whatever it is. But they agree. God gave the Torah to Jewish people. So we'll start with that. And someone pointed out, you can't make something up. 3 million people heard God speak on Mount Sinai. Now you're going to say, how do I know it's true? Because they passed it down. Torah says that the verse that tells us, father's got an obligation, mother's got an obligation to tell over the story of the exodus from Egypt. And that's what we do every Passover, the 15th at night of the month of Nisan. Everywhere in the world, you're gonna have Jews telling over the story. Right? What are you gonna have? You're gonna have 3 matzahs, 4 cups of wine, cup of Elijah the prophet, bitter herbs or herbs, depending where you're from. You're gonna have charoset. You're gonna tell the story. Now, in some places, maybe the story's watered down. Whatever it is, right? Regardless, you have one event, you had all these mitzvahs that talk about coming out of Egypt. We say Friday night, you make Kiddush. Zecher L'tzias Mitzrayim. Right? Remembering the coming out of Egypt. Mezuzah on the door as parchment speaking about what? Coming out of Egypt. Tefillin, parchment. What does it say? Coming out of Egypt. It's a good thing a conservative rabbi 20 years ago or more came out and said, guess what? The Exodus never happened. Yeah, so what do you put in your tefillin? Nothing? You know, what's the parchment goes in your mezuzah? Didn't happen, so why do it? Right? Maybe do it anyway. Submit this. Why? Didn't happen. So if we know, and it's been passed down, generation, this whole story, and there's an obligation to tell it over every year and eat matzah because that commemorates the Jews coming out. Because the matzah didn't have time to rise. Pharaoh threw them out. That's what it commemorates. So to speak. So based on that, I would say, well, isn't that good enough proof Moses existed? And if Moses existed, based on that, and the Exodus happened, we have a lot of proof for that. That's not the point here. But if I have all this evidence and Moses existed and God spoke to him, then didn't God say that, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? That's your people. That's your legacy. So that's how I know they existed also, even though, we have other proofs for that. But back to my original story, right? This rabbi gets up, quote unquote, and he says, if Abraham didn't exist, would we put on tefillin? Now, I'll show you why. It's a stupid question. It's a stupid question, one very simple reason. And that is because Abraham, the Ramchal says in the way of God, in Derech Hashem, the Ramchal here says what? Abraham is the source. Abraham is the root, sorry. He is the root. Isaac, Jacob, the Jewish people, all the branches came out of it, right? Maybe one of the reasons when we say Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, first blessing is Magen Avraham. God, the shield of Abraham. Why Abraham? Why not say, Isaac or Jacob or whatever, right? Or even King David or Joseph, because Abraham's the source. Abraham's the source over here. He's the root. He's the root. Everyone came out of him, right? So this bozo gets up and he says, what if Abraham didn't exist? If he didn't exist, it's no religion at all. Because Abraham's called the father of all nations. The Muslims wouldn't have their own religion, quote unquote. Why? Because they trace their lineage back to who? Yishmael. But how many Muslims are called Ibrahim? Where did Yishmael come from? Abraham. So if he didn't exist and he's not the source of everything for the world, well, guess what? There'd be nothing. There'd be nothing without him. He's the source. He's the root. So if you say, but what if he didn't exist? Would that stop you from putting on tefillin, phylacteries, or whatever? Would that stop you from keeping mitzvahs? Hell yeah, it would. Because then none of this would exist. None of this would exist. If not that he came on to the map, right? And everyone was worshiping idols. Everyone had their pocket God. Here's Bob. Don't leave home without him. Abraham came along and said, no, there's a God by design. whether he saw it at the age of 30 or the age of 40. He believed in a world of design. And he convinced the masses that there's a world of design. Many converted, whatever that conversion looked like. But what's the question? So right, that we understand. That makes sense. But if he didn't exist, you wouldn't have anything. There'd be no religion today. There'd be no worship of God today. God would have found someone else. But he came onto the scene, so God chose him. Right? And good reason. So you can't say, well, if he didn't exist, if he didn't exist, there's no Torah mitzvahs. There's no base. You would have needed someone else. Good. But what's the next question? Next question would be, okay, you're going to tell me now no one's ever made such a claim. You can't make up a claim in front of 3 million people. I remember I had these Mormons. Second biggest group of Mormons outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, is in Santiago, Chile. Not exactly sure why. But these Mormons come to my door trying to convince me, all these different things. And finally, after me asking them a bunch of questions, which they didn't have answers for, finally they get back to me. They say, listen, don't you think an unbelievable story? This Book of Mormon hidden in a cave. Hidden in a cave 200 years. John Smith came, found this book, all this. I got a better story. You ever read the Bible? Acts chapter 19, chapter 20. Jewish people come out of Egypt. 3 million people. Like, wow, unbelievable story. I said, right. Kind of beats your 200 years finding a book in a cave, doesn't it? But what's the obvious question? Okay, so that's something you can't make up. And in any other culture, that has never been duplicated. The story of Mount Sinai, never been duplicated. Good. What's the next question someone would ask? The next question someone would ask is, isn't this a big game of telephone? How do I know? How do I know what happened that way? How do I know, that they got the facts right, so to speak? So again, one simple proof would be, we'll take a Passover Seder. It used to be that there were 4 generations of the Passover Seder. You had a great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and a child. I saw a cousin of mine when I was in Florida. Cousin of my father's, which cousin of mine, actually, as well. And this woman's 95 years old. So now imagine, she has a Passover Seder. Now, her son, I think is about 72 that I met. So, okay, so you got 2 generations there. So he's got a son, let's say it's 40. And he's got a son or a daughter or whatever, that's, I don't know, 10, 12, 15, whatever, right? Can be a child. Now, my father's cousin's 95. She's at the top over here. You have 4 generations. 4 generations there. Now, at one point, this cousin of mine was a child. Right? Kind of hard to imagine. She's 95 years old, right? So you do the math. So you go back almost 100 years ago. So you're talking about 1823, right? 1923. Jumped to 200 years, right? So you get 1918. That's when she was born. Do the math, right? Well, 1918. So now she's 5. So that's when she was born. So 1923, she's 5 years old. Now she could have seen her great-grandfather. Let's say her great-grandfather was 80, right? He had a son that was 55, let's say, and that son had her. You got 4 generations, right? So how many of those generations do you need to go back to Mount Sinai? Now, let's just take this case. You have this 80-year-old great-grandfather. Remember, he was a child, so go back another 75 years. Now you're already in the 1800s. Then you go back, let's say another 80 years, you're in the 1700s. Don't that, how far back do you have to go? Right? So the answer is you need about 80 of those generations. So you're going to say, wow, that's a lot. Not necessarily. You only need 80 of those generations. Even if we're telling we need 1,000, right? That's a big number. Or more, or, a little bit less, whatever it is. But if you tell me it's less than 100, it's less than 100 generations, it's not so far-fetched. But it's more than that. If you're going to tell me one event in history, the Jews came out of Egypt, and you're going to go anywhere in the world on the 15th of Nisan, in the month of Nisan, and you're going to see, again, 4 cups of wine, a cup for Elijah, 3 matzahs, charoset, bitter herbs. One event in history. One event in history. Right? We're going to say, how did it not get distorted? It's very simple. Everything was passed down orally until, the rabbis were afraid it was going to be forgotten, so they wrote it down. Right? But how many people do you think it took to pass down these customs? 1, 5,000. You're talking 3 million people. How are 3 million people going to get this information? How are they going to remember all this information? Simple answer is you had many chains memorizing certain things. You could add hundreds or thousands of chains, memorizing all the laws about kashrus, all the laws about blessings, mikvah, other things, right? Mikvah is a good example, right? All the details of, they found ancient mikvahs that go according, to exactly what the Mishnah tells us. What the Mishnah tells us about, the dimensions and what's supposed to be, what's kosher, not kosher about a mikvah, right? This is before it's all written down. Well, before it's written down. Tonight, wow, what an interesting coincidence. They found ancient mikvahs at the time of Herod, that match exactly what the Mishnah says hundreds of years before. Many, many years before. So you can say, wow, got lucky. But the dimensions of other mikvahs they found were exactly the same. They met the same criteria. Right? So if that's true, how did that get passed down? How did that information get passed down? They were lucky? No, we don't believe in luck. What did they do? Right? So the rabbis were smart. They don't need me to agree. They had hundreds and hundreds of lines of people. Right? Meaning they had chains. Hundreds of people memorizing different things. Right? When you have hundreds of people memorizing the same thing, guess what? It's going to get remembered. Right? If you play a game of telephone where one person says something to another, then that other person has to pass it to someone else. The other person has to give it over to someone else. By the time you get to the 10th person, it doesn't sound the same, not even close. They're going to say, but how'd they get it right? Because they had a lot of chains. They had a lot of links. You didn't just have one person trying to memorize a ton of information. You had a lot of people memorizing information. So therefore, since you had a lot of people memorizing information, they'll get it right. Because it's not just one person or 2 people. That's why it's not a problem. Right? That's not why, that's not a reason we're going to say, oh, it's totally distorted. Right? It's not distorted. Because the information's coming out the same. They're passing it down equally. Now, what the Reform movement, conservative movement did, that's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different thing. They distorted things. They made up things. They took out things. Quote unquote, added. They added, they took out, whatever. That's what they did. But the way we see it is the fact that it's all one thing. And it's all accurate. Now, can you have certain things, let's say in a Torah scroll, can you have certain things in a Torah scroll, you have misspellings? Could. Right? But if the misspelling, right, is the misspelling in the sense where it changes the meaning of the word, that's a whole different thing. But, that's why, if anyone's ever been to a synagogue service, they hear someone reading Torah, right, on Shabbos or during the week. If they make a mistake, they make a mistake in the reading, normally someone will correct them. Or maybe a bunch of people may correct them, right? If it changes the meaning of the word. If it changes the meaning of the word, you have to go back and repeat it. You have to say it right. Someone will say, come on, he's in public. Isn't it embarrassing someone in public? There's no such thing over here. No such thing. Why? Because he's got to read it right. He's got to get it right. Can't get it wrong. But what say it doesn't change the meaning? If it doesn't change the meaning, you let it go. You can let it go. Now, based on that, let's say one Torah scroll, there are certain words that instead of ending in an aleph, which it should, they ended it with a hey. Right? Let's say. Where it does not change the meaning. Right? That's one thing. So you're going to say, but isn't that a mistake? Yeah, it's a mistake. And if a Torah scroll has one mistake, right, you can't use it. So what do? So you got to compare Torah scrolls. And you go according to the majority. Right? In other words, if the majority of Torah scrolls spells it one way, this Torah scroll spells it another way, you change it. You go according to the majority. Right? So we sort of had that with Dead Sea Scrolls. Right? But again, that doesn't invalidate. Why doesn't it invalidate? Why do they see, they got it wrong? Oral law is wrong over here. What happens? Because over time, people forgot how to spell certain things. That's not unheard of. I mean, Jews are in the diaspora. If the Jews are in the diaspora and, longer they've been in diaspora, the worse it's been. And then, you got people who know very little or whatever the case is. So you can have mistakes. You can have mistakes in spelling. But remember that's just the case of, okay, did I put a hey? Did I put a yud? There, did I put an aleph there? That in no way says, see, the Torah's not true. People forgot how to spell. So there were mistakes that could have crept in. Right? Totally could have crept in. Right? So if that's true, and they could have crept in, okay. That doesn't mean it's a mistake in the whole thing. Doesn't mean that at all. Just means it's a mistake how they spelled it. Okay. Right? I'm just throwing out there to show, maybe you had certain discrepancies here and there. That doesn't invalidate the system. They changed it, they made it up, they did other things. Doesn't mean that. When you're in exile, maybe you don't remember how certain things are spelled. But at the same time, it cannot change the meaning of the word. That's a whole different thing. So even if there are discrepancies, and you can see even in a Chumash, they'll say this is the way it's written, this is the way you read it. Because if it can written in a certain way, but it's read differently, again, that doesn't mean that the tradition is wrong. It just means people made mistakes. So this is the way it was written. It was written either, let's say, with a vav, without a vav, had a hey, didn't have a hey, right? But you have to read it a certain way, right? Which the rabbis tell us how to do it. You have to read it a certain way. That doesn't mean you throw out the whole system. It just means that, they didn't spell it right. They made, there are mistakes that can creep in. But make no mistake, no pun intended. Make no mistake over here, even if there's a mistake in the spelling, cannot change the meaning of the word. And in all the times you see in the Chumash, it's written this way, you read it that way, you have to read it a certain way, right? So that's not gonna change. That's not gonna change over here. It's just a question of spelling, in general, right? So again, when it comes to these type of things, people are gonna say, "Wow, oral law, quote unquote, maybe they got it wrong." But you see, things are uniform. You have different customs in different communities. From Sephardic to Hasidic to Ashkenaz, or Litvaks, as we'll call them, Lithuanian Jews. Whatever it is, subtle differences, even the way they pray, the way some of the prayers are formed, that when we say them, they're different. Hasidim do not pray the same way as Ashkenazim, meaning, the prayer is a little bit different. Sephardim, same thing, right? So they have different customs from different places where they came from. Now, does that change necessarily the meaning? No. Doesn't change. 100% it doesn't change. The issue is that 95, 98% of everything in the Torah, everyone agrees. Ashkenazim, Sephardim, Hasidim, right? We all agree, in most things. There are different customs for certain things. Okay. And even if they are, right? Even if there are different customs, so what? That doesn't invalidate anything. Totally doesn't invalidate. Right? It depends I shouldn't say that. It depends what it is. Right? Some people say you have to do it this way. Some people say the other way. Right? It depends what it is. But in general, the vast majority of Torah, everyone agrees. The way they view certain things, they may disagree. Right? In Jewish philosophy, how they look at the state of Israel, how, that's one thing. Question about the Messiah, when he's going to come, how he's going to come. I mean, there are a lot of things. How you view working versus learning. Many things. Philosophically, they can disagree on. Okay. That doesn't change the meaning of what the Torah says. That's not what it does. Totally doesn't change the meaning. It's a different way, of looking at the world. Okay. So that being said, what do I have? What do I have? I have differences. But do these differences really matter? No. Person comes to pray in a synagogue. Are these things going to come up in conversation? No. Probably not. I shouldn't say no 100%. It shouldn't come up. These things shouldn't necessarily come up in conversation. Why? Because you're there to pray, period. 100% you're there to pray. Right? You're there to pray. So, what you believe is more or less the same. God gave the Torah to Moses. Moses passed it down. We have to keep oral law, right? We have to listen to what the rabbis say. We have to keep Shabbos. You have to keep the holidays, different things. We all agree on that. There are some differences in how certain things are done. Okay. That doesn't negate anything. Totally doesn't negate anything. Right? So a person shouldn't get caught up and say, oh, look, see, they have such different customs. What are you talking about? What is such different customs? They have a few different customs here and there. Okay. Does that mean one's more valid than the other? No. I mean, maybe some will say, this is really the right way to do it. All right, whatever. But in general, no. Not going to invalidate. Right? Not going to invalidate one or the other. Right? So that being the case, a person can't say, well, look, there are all these differences. The differences are not that great. That it makes a difference, it distinguishes anything over here. Say, oh, look, see, that proves Moses didn't exist. Doesn't prove anything. Torah doesn't prove that. Because there are different customs and different things doesn't mean they don't believe the same things. The core things, or the vast majority of everything, when it comes to Torah mitzvahs, is not an issue. Totally not an issue. So yeah, it is important to believe, God created the world, God gave us the Torah, passed it down to Moses, Moses passed it down to us, right? So you have to look at, first of all, how oral law works, which is a whole discussion of itself. We sort of spoken about a number of times. In the fact that once I see the bigger pictures, we always say, right, then this becomes a given. If you believe the exodus from Egypt happened, and God spoke to Moses. So you don't have to ask that question. You're going to say, oh, what's the physical proof? If I have enough internal logic within the Torah itself that, if I can show the Jews were in Egypt, and I have proof of papyrus, right, that the Jews were in Egypt and these things happened, right? All these, the devastation that happened in Egypt. And we can prove that. So let's say, okay, that's 30%. That's most of the book of Exodus. Now, I would say, if I would have 30% proof, do I need the other 70% to say it's true? Let's say I have concrete proof on 30%. I would say even less. Well, let's say 30%. I have concrete proof. If I prove that the Jews were in Egypt, and I show that Moses was in charge, right? Moses, God says, is connected to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that gives Moses validity through them, right? And then God says, Moses, my trusted prophet. So then the other things, either they haven't been proven, doesn't mean it's not true. I had somebody once tell me, college student many years ago, tell me if you could prove it 99%. 99%, I have 1% free will to say it's not true. The only a Jew would say this. Non-Jew wouldn't say this, right? So I said, you're 99% proof. Imagine if I knew 99% of the time, if I would play roulette and I would, and black 13 comes up, 99% of the time, I'm going to be very rich. Very rich. Even if it was 75%, you're going to be pretty rich. Even if it's 60%, you're going to be pretty rich. So he said, but I still have free will. So I said, if you write a term paper, how do you write a term paper? Right? So he says, you take a thesis, you spend the majority of the term paper proving it, and then you conclude. You make a conclusion. Very good. So I said, what happens if you leave your conclusion in doubt? You brought proof, then you say, well, I'm not really sure about this, sure about that. Your proof is not conclusive. I said, you can't do that. I said, oh, why not? Why not? Because you fail. Oh, very good. So here, you got to evaluate the evidence. You got to see, is there enough evidence? To show. If there's enough evidence, if I don't have the other evidence, shouldn't matter. Right? Do I need 99%? No. Do I need 70%? I would say no. Right? I would think 30, 40% is good enough. Even less. Why? Because if I know I have that proof, that's enough. Should be enough. Right? Regardless, you say, oh, but what about the other 60, 70%? But this you know for sure. So if I know this for sure, and this has been proven, and I got at least 3/4 of a book in the Torah out of the 5 books, I got, let's say, 20%. 20% I have verified. Verified as fact, non-disputable. You're going to say, what about the 80%? What about the other 80%? Right? That you don't have the proof for. So who says we're never going to find it? But I would say it's not even the 80%. Because they got 20% concrete. 20% doesn't change. That everyone would agree. So if that's true, then I could say by deduction, through logic, that the other stuff must also be true. Why? Because they have enough proof. Right? But some people may say, no, I need at least 70%. I need at least 80%, proof. Now, it doesn't mean the Torah is not true. It just means you don't have physical proof. But if I have internal logic, and that's not really the point here, but if I have internal logic to show one thing's true, I can say by virtue of deduction, maybe all the other things are true also. That's not such a leap of faith over here. Right? But that's what I would say. That's what I would say on that. So yeah, it is pretty crucial, that belief in the fact that Moses existed, that Abraham existed, that Isaac existed. Because if they didn't exist and it's all a fairy tale, why would we keep it at all? Wouldn't keep anything. totally wouldn't keep anything. Right? I could say, the book, the Quran, which we believe is a false book, but based on their false book, they say, hey, who do we go after? Who's our great grandfather, Yishmael? You get all these Muslims, okay, believing in a false book, but they're claiming, where's the genealogy come from? Son of Abraham. Okay, different mother, but a son of Abraham. What would that? They all agree. How many Arabs or Muslims are named Ibrahim? A lot. Either that or Muhammad, Mahmed, whatever, have other names. But if a lot of them have the name Ibrahim, they're assuming Abraham existed. So I can say, well, I can use that proof. I don't necessarily want to, but I can also say, look at all the Muslims. They believe 100% Abraham's the father of Yishmael. That's exactly what the Torah says. Exactly what the Torah says. So couldn't I say, based on that, well, the fact that they believe in him, and they claim their great grandfather is Yishmael. Can also say, maybe, that'd be good enough proof for us, because look at the majority of them say it, right? But people are going to say, come on, it's a false book. They can totally, made up the whole thing and made up Yishmael also. True. That definitely true. So I'm not going to use that as a proof, but there's a lot of internal logic. Right? To show that. So, I made a number of videos on that. So you can go on my Facebook page, Beyond Orthodox, my YouTube channel. It's all there. Playlists of controversial issues. Right? I spoke about it. Right? Belief in God. Right? Belief that the Torah is true. Right? Where it came from. A lot of different ways. So I think that answers to answer that. Someone asks, is it also not true 9 and 10 commandments could be written by any human? Except my authority rests on that day. Don't murder. Only Hashem could decree that we do not covet, for no human king possibly enforce that. Therefore, 10 commandments of hidden proof. If you look at the Torah itself, if you look at the 10 commandments, right? You look at the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments themselves, believe in one God. That's a whole novel idea, because everyone believed in multiple gods. Right? Idolatry, a terrible thing. Right? That's not logical. Totally not logical. Yeah, don't murder, don't steal. Don't covet. It's kind of hard, to implement that. I would agree. And the level of what it means to covet, and to want something that someone else has, or whatever the case is. So that being the case, don't desire anything, that's not yours per se, because you might come and steal it. You might want to steal it. Whatever the case is, don't kill, don't kidnap. I mean, that's also pretty logical, I would say, right? Don't, when it says don't steal in 10 commandments, it means don't kidnap, because there are other verses talk about don't steal. So you have these commandments against idolatry, swearing falsely. I wouldn't say that's logical, right? Would a human king say don't swear falsely? I don't know. I don't know if that's so logical. Honoring parents, yeah, I would say that's pretty logical. Keeping Shabbos, illogical. Totally illogical. Right? A human king would never make such a decree. Why would he say take off one day and not do any of these forbidding categories? Right? There are things that are logical, true. Right? So you're going to say for those things that are not logical within the 10 commandments, that hidden proof the Torah is true. I would say like this. If I was going to write a book and I wanted people to follow it, I would make it the easiest book in the world to follow. I wouldn't give 613 commandments. I give like 3, 5 that are very, very easy to do. Not only are they easy to do, I would make them absolutely logical. Because why would a human being, if you're going to say it's written by a human, why would a human being make up so many laws that are absolutely make no sense? Pretty much almost 80% of the Torah. Shatnez, come on, spoke about that last week. Wearing something that's wool and linen together. That's not logical. Red heifer, totally not logical. Shabbos not logical. Kashrus is not logical. Right? The laws of mixing milk and meat. Because if I take something that's permissible, meat is permissible, cheese is permissible, I put them together over an open fire, makes it forbidden. Why? It's illogical. Many, many things are illogical. I mean, I don't have to understand it, but at the same time, I would say like this, that a person, it would make more sense if someone's going to make logical laws, and the laws are very few, it'd be easier to keep, much easier to keep. So I would say if you look at the laws in general, it has to be divine. It has to be divine by one very simple reason. Because no human being going to make up such a thing. Don't make any logical sense. You're going to wear a person's going to wear a suit. It says 100% wool. You're going to say, well, there might be linen in the thread and the buttons, so you can't wear it. Why? There's a whole explanation about it, actually. This whole Rav Leff was explaining this whole disagreement between Cain and Abel. Right? What did Abel bring? He brought the best of his animal, right? Right, he brought a sheep, right? So he said he got wool, and he brought what did Cain bring? Flax. Right? He brought flax, kind of like putting dandelions on an altar. He brought flax. As God didn't like his offering, so there's this conflict. Rav Leff was saying from the beginning of time, there's conflicts between wool and linen, right? And how it manifested itself to make this forbidden. Right? One possible explanation, how we looked at it. But again, if you're looking at it just from a logical perspective, not knowing anything else, and you tell someone you can't wear wool and linen, Jew or non-Jew, you'll think they're out of your mind. That you are out of your mind. That makes no sense. Right? Totally makes no sense. Right? So if I was going to write a book, I'd make it easy. Fewer mitzvahs and mitzvahs that make absolute sense. Right? When it comes to, not coveting, okay, that's something in the mind, right? But the laws are complex. I just gave a class on this, on Noahide laws, about stealing. One of the aspects of stealing, for non-Jews is about you're not allowed to covet. But the question is, what does that mean? If I see something that belongs to someone else that I want, but I don't do anything to get it, does that mean I covet it? Even if I don't do anything? Or what if I badger the person? I badger the person left and right. I badger them to try and get them to sell it. Really? They don't want to sell it. But I badger them. I'm sure people can't imagine I would do this. Right? But I would badger someone, try and get them to sell. Right? Now, what if they sold it? It's a good sale. Right? So the question is, how many times you have to badger someone before they finally sell it to be considered to covet? Right? So something like that, you're right, it's in your mind. So you can't get punished necessarily for something in your mind. Because words in our heart don't really mean anything. True. But that's not what covet means over here. It's not just in your mind. It's that you want something and now you are going to act on it to try and get something from someone else. You really don't want to part with your Ming vase. It's like, come along and tell you, it's not really worth that much. Why do you want it? I don't care. It's a family heirloom. It's just taking up space, whatever. I give all these reasons to get you to try and sell it. You don't want to sell it, this, that. If I make you an offer, say, wow, such an interesting offer. You know what? I'll sell it. But even if they sell it with a full heart, guess what? I would be over Torah prohibition of coveting, even if it's good, even if it's a good sale. Right? So you're right. Things in your heart you can't prove. You can't prove, but the reality is, a person is punished for certain things in their heart, even if they don't act on it. One is idolatry we've spoken about, one is immorality. Even if you don't act on it, you can still be punished. Right? Covet does not necessarily mean in your heart. Covet means you do something. Yeah, you're right. You want something someone else has. Very good. But then you do something in order to get it. It's not just, I'm thinking in my heart, how could a human king how can a human king punish me? It's not about that. A person can be punished anyway, right? But what's the reason over here? The reason is not just by their thoughts. The reason over here is because your thoughts lead you to want it. And then you're going to do whatever it takes to try and get it. That's where it's forbidden. And the question is, how many times you have to badger someone to transgress? Right? That's a whole discussion. Someone then asked, grapes, when made into wine, they have a different blessing. True, right? Grapes normally break out eights, grow in a tree, even though we say normally they grow in a vine, but we hold that the blessing it's more like a tree. So we hold the blessing is break out guffin over wine or grape juice. Olives were made into olive oil. Okay, they're crushed in olive oil, which is arguably of similar importance. Doesn't have another blessing. Yeah. First of all, there's a difference between olives and grapes. Grapes, when you crush them or whatever, retains the juice that comes out of it. We're not looking at it as juice of any other thing. We're not looking at it as, let's say, apple juice or orange juice or whatever, because the juice that comes out of a fruit is called the sweat of the fruit. So it's really a totally separate entity. The importance of grapes is a totally different thing. So the fact that they get fermented and they made into wine changes the blessing. Changes the blessing. Even if it's just made into grape juice, same thing, changes the blessing. Now, oil, you're right. Oil can be used to anoint and for other things. Very, very true. When you're talking about a blessing, first of all, no one's going to drink it. No one drinks olive oil in general, right? Olives, you can, that's one of the things. Grapes and olives, you're not allowed to squeeze on Shabbos. Why? Because these are two things that are always used for their juice. Now, that doesn't mean people don't eat grapes. Plenty of people eat grapes, right? That is true. The fact that people eat grapes, and people drink the juice from the grapes. Olives are normally eaten. They're normally eaten by themselves. The juice nobody eats. Usually, no one eats, right? So the olive oil itself goes on other things. It's there to enhance. It's an enhancer. You're right. It's used for sacramental things, but the blessing's a totally different thing. Because here it changes from something that's, it's not we look at it, if you would drink it, it'd be shako. Should be. I mean, no one really, it's not used for that. But if you would, it would totally change. Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if it's used for sacramental things or not. The point is that, wine, grapes, and olives are one of the 7 species. 2 of the 7 species the land of Israel is praised by. Very good. You have dates, figs, pomegranates, as well. Right? So that being the case, all right, it is more important than other things. Right? Grapes are more important than apples, even if they're smaller. Even if they're not whole, let's say. They have more importance. So olives also, because again, something the land of Israel was praised by, but what comes out of it's different. The usage is different. Even if you use olive oil, to anoint kings and all that, a blessing is a totally different thing. Totally different thing. Somebody asks, were all the Amalekites completely evil? Yes. That was easy. Were they totally evil? Yes. Hashem wanted them all killed. Why? They brought doubt to the world. What was doubt to the world they brought? The doubt was they brought atheism to the world, which still is alive and well today. That there's no such thing as supernatural. So God said, I don't want that in the world. Wiped it out. Now, we don't know who the Amalekites are today. Some say the Germans during World War II, Yimach Shemam V'Zichron, may their name be blotted out, may they rot wherever they are. They may have been Amalekites. We don't know who Amalekites are today. We have no idea, right? So in a couple of weeks, we're going to read Parshas Zachor right before Purim. We're going to read about the Amalekites, and then you're going to wipe them out. How do you wipe them out? Can't wipe them out physically. No possible way to wipe them out physically. We know who they are. You got to wipe out the idea. That's meaning the idea that there is a supernatural runs the world. We have to bring God into this world by keeping Torah and mitzvahs. That's what we have to do. That's how you wipe out their memory. The more people keeping Torah and mitzvahs, and the more Noahides out there believe in one God, right? And they believe in the supernatural power. So that's a huge thing, right? So that still exists today, no question. Right? Can the Amalekites overcome their bad desire? Good question. Good question. Everybody's built is born with bad desires. We all have bad desires. Now, some people, let's say, have worse anger issues than other people. Some people have worse, have other things, that other people may not have or whatever. They could have very strong desires. God says, I don't want you to act on it. Now, is it impossible to overcome? No. Could an Amalekite be a good person and overcome their bad character trait? They could. They're at a tremendous disadvantage. We're all at a tremendous disadvantage with different bad character traits that we have. There are some that are so bad that's okay. We got a lot of work to do. It's part of our psyche. We got to get rid of it. We got to work hard, right, to try and get rid of it. So the point is, even if a person's born that way, some people say, well, what about a person born as homosexual? Throw this out there. I want to be a little bit controversial today, right? So what if they have a homosexual gene? That means they have a desire that they have to overcome. Now, you're going to say, but you have a gene. So what? And anger is not a bad gene. And being a miser is not a bad gene. Speaking of Lashon Hara is not a bad gene. They're all bad genes. Right? It means you're wired a certain way. Okay. Now, if you act on being wired that way, is that what God wants? No. So what is the person going to complain after 120 years? God's going to say, hey, why'd you do this today? He said, you wired me that way. Let's say that's true. God wired a person that way. Okay. God said, I didn't tell you to act on it. He said, yeah, but you wired me that way. So what? God wired a person to be a night person. They like to stay up late at night. God said, I don't care. Get up and, you got to get up and pray at a normal time. God doesn't care. God gave you a certain digestion that maybe is worse than other people. And say, well, shut up and eat the matzah. I don't care. If you can't eat gluten, so eat oat matzah, melts in your hand, not in your mouth. Right? Falls apart, oat matzah. Anyone's ever seen it? Costs quite a bit also. Right? So you're going to say, well, so what do I do? So you're going to fix it somehow. You got to improvise over here. Right? Certainly on Passover for that. But it doesn't matter. You have a nighttime gene. Good. God says, I don't care. You got to get up and pray. Right? There are things you have to do. I got a big mouth gene. Yeah, I have that. Probably got a Lashon Hara gene. Okay, you got to work on it. So what, you're wired that way. But you're going to say, no, something's genetic. Okay, that means it's harder to fight. That's all it means. It's harder to fight. So even if you're wired that way, God says, I didn't want you to act on it. But you did. So you're not going to be able to use that as an excuse. You can't say, well, it's your fault. You did it. God says, yeah, you're right. I put you this way. I made you this way. That's your DNA. So I wanted you to act on it? No. You have free choice. 100%. Right? You have free choice. Someone asking, I celebrate February 14th. Someone says, yeah, Valentine was a Catholic saint. Okay. What does Valentine's Day mean today? Not very much. Big holiday for Hallmark. Maybe. Right? Or whatever it is. But is it forbidden? See, Jews are not allowed to go in the ways of non-Jews. Would I say non-Jews are forbidden? I wouldn't say that. It's not I wouldn't say it's a religious holiday by any stretch. And if it would be, yeah, that might be idolatry. But if it's not, can a non-Jew celebrate it? Why not? Do they have an obligation not to go in the ways of non-Jews? I don't think they do. Right? Would I say it's a moral imperative not to? Yeah. Obligated? No. Not at all. Oh, that's what someone says, right? I didn't read further. Should have read further. No, I'm not worshiping St. Valentine. True? Totally not worshiping him. No question, right? If it's an issue, if it's an issue of a moral imperative of not going to the way of non-Jews, I would say that, yeah, it's a different issue. Obligation, no, totally not. Someone has to live in a Hindu Christian home. Their idols and photo of a Caucasian yashka. Ooh. Should I make a blessing before eating or should I stop? If you make a blessing, I wouldn't, probably can't pray there, that's for sure. Making a blessing, turn around or whatever, you're not facing it, then yeah, that's definitely better. Right? That's definitely, that's definitely better. Yeah, you don't want to necessarily make waves either. I would agree, family-wise, but yeah, making a blessing in front of an idol is a problem. I would definitely say it's a problem. So it's certainly better not to. But you got to do it in a way where it's, I would say, inconspicuous. People don't know what you're doing. Because if they know what you're doing, it might cause, you might offend people. So you're going to say, well, what difference does it make? If I offend people, I don't offend people, it's wrong. They have to know what the truth is. Okay. Right? But you got to be smart also. You don't want to just offend people, but people have to understand, what's right, what's wrong. So yeah, you got to be careful. Yeah, I would say you're right. You got to be careful with that. Someone asked, what's the significance of when the Torah scrolls moved around the synagogue and members kiss the scroll to show the love that a Jew has for Torah, right? The Torah scroll represents everything in the Torah, right? That's why you stand up for it. You show it honor, right? So a person kisses the Torah scroll, shows it honor, shows that you love it, that, you revere it, so to speak. Someone asked, why did Yisro convert and leave? Yeah, there's a question, why Yisro himself did not go with the Jewish people, right? And it would make sense, 100%. It would make sense that he should have gone with the Jewish people. Now, some would say that why did he leave? He left because he felt, he was like the high priest, tried every, idol, the high priest of Midyan. So he thought that, okay, now I have this knowledge, now I understand. So now let me go back to my hometown where I grew up and let me have influence over them. Let me try and influence them on the truth. Right? So it could be that's why I went back. That's why I left. I didn't come with the Jewish people. Right? Like, so, you see what Chabad does. They go all over the world. Middle of nowhere. Right? Why don't, some of them live, within striking distance of an Orthodox community. Some people live in Timbuktu. They live absolutely in the middle of nowhere. Wouldn't it make sense to be part of a greater community? True. I don't think anyone would disagree. Right? But they feel they have a mission. And their mission is try and save every Jew they can. That's their mission. Where's the biggest Passover Seder today? Kathmandu. Tibet, of all places. It's where all these Israelis go after the army. Right? They got, 1,000 people there for a Passover Seder. Why would a Jewish person be in the middle of Tibet, for goodness sakes? Or Thailand or other places? But they feel they have a mission. That's their mission. Now, I would say, wouldn't it be better to be part of a mainstream community, at least within striking distance? Sure. That's not what they hold. They hold they have to be in all these places in order to bring back Jews wherever they are. Right? So Yisro went according to that. He wanted to bring his own people closer to what the Torah says, belief in Torah. Instead of being with everybody else and being part of the majority or whatever, he didn't want to do that. Right? He didn't want to do that. So maybe I'll do like Chabad in a certain way. Maybe that's what I'll title this, that Yisro was a Chabadnik, maybe. Right? He wanted to go save his own people as much as he could. He felt it would have a greater impact, than trying to go around the world. Go with the Jewish people. Someone asked about the Druze Arabs in northern Israel. Yeah, that descend from him, from Yishmael, is going to fight along Gog, Jews and Gog and Magog. Not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. That I would have to look into. The Druze Arabs are Christians, not Muslims. Right? They're Christians. So, are they going to be around to help? I don't know. I don't. It seems like when the Malbim says it's going to be Yishmael against Edom, meaning the Muslims against the Jewish people, the Muslims against the Western world, then they're going to fight against the Jews. Are these Druze Christians going to be part of it? Fight alongside the Jews? Don't know. There are Druze that serve in the army. Here in Israel, true. They are. Obviously the army trusts them, and they're not considered like the Muslims. So to speak. So that's definitely better. Again, at the end of the day, they're going to fight. With the Jews, could be. I don't know. Don't know. Can the soul be reincarnated into a few bodies? No. I mean, if you mean at the same time, I would say no. A soul can come back. If a soul comes back into a body, it's usually one body. Or let's say a soul comes back into a rock or a wall. It's part of that. It's only part of one thing. It cannot be split up and put into different. A soul can't. As far as I understand, you're not gonna, carve up a soul, so to speak, and go into a rock, a fish, and a person at the same time. Can they come back in different bodies? Yes, that's definitely true. Separately, not all together. Can you have a soul in two different bodies? No, it's usually in one body or another, right? But it's not usually it's not in two different bodies at the same time. Somebody asks. There's an obligation of the rabbis to rebuke Jews that don't believe in eternal hell. There are people that do it, 100%. Should they be rebuked? I mean, there are plenty of things to rebuke them for not keeping Torah mitzvahs. I mean, there is a mitzvah. The one of the 13 principles is believe in resurrection of the dead, right? So the question is, what resurrection of the dead includes? Resurrection of the dead includes Olam Haba. Right? Olam Haba is not meaning the next world. The spiritual world is not included in the Rambam's principles of the 13 principles of faith. Right? So commentaries ask, why not? Right? So one explanation is Olam Haba is included in resurrection. The only question is, where does it fit in the cycle? Where does it fit in the timeline? Is Olam Haba before resurrection? Is it after resurrection? A lot of discussion, not the topic for now. A lot of discussion, a lot of differences of opinion. About the Messianic era. And, when the Messiah comes, is that going to mean resurrection right afterwards? Does it mean Olam Haba? When does all this happen? It's a major, major disagreement. Major difference of opinion, right? So, is it important for Jews to believe in heaven and hell? Sure. The next world, so to speak, and reward and punishment, first of all, is there. It's one of the 13 principles of the Rambam. So that for sure you have to believe it, right? That's nothing to talk about. So what about heaven and hell? Heaven and hell is part of the principle, as we explained. Part of the principle of resurrection. So don't they have to believe in that? Sure. I spoke about this last week. Someone said, no, I don't believe, I'm going to get punished so much. I'm a good person. So I spoke about that. Totally spoke about that. Right? Someone had put up a video from Rav Nissen Yagain, blessed memory. Great Sephardic rabbi, did tremendous amount of Jewish outreach years ago. A blessed memory. And he told the story of somebody that, had a number of near-death experiences, and one of these near-death experiences is he told the story that, he was being dragged by these destructive angels, and it was punished for like 2,800 years of, unbelievable punishment, this and that. But, through the Baal Shem Tov, he was able to come back to his body and eventually repented. But it showed, he was given different chances. But like, he never should have survived. There are two things: he never should have survived. Totally never should have survived. But he had this out of body experience, and this is the story that he told. So you're gonna say, well, big deal. What does that show? Shows there's reward and punishment, that's for sure. Right? Yeah, but if you don't believe in it, that's a problem. That's not believing in reward and punishment. Guess what? That's one of 13 principles. It's one of 13 principles of the Rambam. That's pretty severe. If you don't believe in that, you lose your status as a Jew. Doesn't mean you can't repent. You can obviously repent. Right? But you lose your status of a Jew over here. So reward and punishment is also talking about in this world or in the next world. It's also talking in the next world. That's pretty crucial. It's pretty crucial. Right? That people believe in it. Sure. Is it important to believe, there's one God and all, yeah, there are things to believe in also. True. But yeah, if people don't believe in things that are crucial to be a Jew, that's heresy. 100%, that's heresy. I don't have an issue with that. The book Reishis Chachma, the beginning of wisdom, as it's called, talks about different levels of hell. So if you don't believe, why do you write this book anyway? A lot of it's all according to Kabbalah. But why would someone write this, very thick work and different levels of that if it didn't exist? Right? So yeah, it's a pretty crucial thing to believe in. I mean, there are other crucial things to believe in also. This is one of them. The whole thing about Om Haba and how it works, like, no, you really think he's going to get punished, right? I heard someone, gets a lot of people to listen to him, come on, this person 3 years old was playing with dolls, this guy. So what do you think? God's going to punish him? Because it's obvious this person, is gay, is going to end up being gay and this and that. So what do you think? God's going to punish him? Yeah, the Orthodox, this person says, are going to be upset with me saying this. Damn right. You know why? Because that's heresy. That goes against Leviticus chapter 18. Yeah, I know they're going to be upset with me because it's heresy. So what? He's playing with dolls at the age of 3. Okay? But he's born that way. It can change. It can certainly change. Just an unnatural desire, but okay. That's heresy. 100%. Person like that, 100% should be rebuked. Totally should be rebuked. Right? No one should ever listen to such a thing. Drivel, as I would call it. Or I would say better, fluff. Total fluff. Make people feel good. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You're not going to fry in hell. Nothing bad's going to happen. God's going to love you anyway. Rubbish. Anyone who says that's rubbish goes against what King David said. King David says, clear. He says, those that hate you, I hate. Those that love you, I love. Meaning, those that hate you, I'll fight against. I'll fight against because they're going against you. These people have to be fought against. 100%. People have to be warned. Totally warned. Somebody says, don't worry. God loves you. It things that God hates. Right? You see that by Pinchas. What does God hate? Immorality. Killed 24,000 people. God hates immorality. That's immorality. No, you don't understand. He's born that way. God hates immorality. Bottom line. Don't let anyone tell you, God's going to look the other way. He's going to love you. No. You got an abnormal, retarded, I'm going to say it, right? It's a crazy thing. It's a crazy desire. I'm not saying people don't have it or whatever, but crazy desire. So if that's the case, God's going to look the other way? Why is he going to look the other way? It's not his fault. Whose fault is it? He's got a gene. I got a lot of bad genes, I can tell you. A lot of bad genes. So what? Doesn't mean I don't have to work on it. Doesn't mean that. You're just born at disadvantage, like we said before. Depends what the disadvantage is in. Could be a disadvantage of anything. right? Right. So yeah, this is a pretty crucial thing. I have no issue with that. It's a pretty crucial thing to believe that there's reward and punishment and there's heaven and hell. Yeah, pretty crucial. Pretty crucial. Was Yisro proselytized? Yisro, when he went back, he did kiruv. He's doing outreach. He's doing outreach. Right? He won, is he telling everyone to convert? No. You can still have a portion of the world to come staying as a non-Jew. We don't proselytize. I've been accused of that a number of times. You proselytize towards non-Jews. No, I don't. I give people information. They want to convert? Great. They meet the criteria, very good. They don't want to convert, they want to eat shrimp, very good. They can stay in Noahide, not a problem. I'm not telling people what to do. People make up their own choice. Right? People have their own free will. You want to stay in Noahide? Okay. Not a problem. We're not looking for converts. Not interested in converts, but someone shows I want to be the real deal. Very good. So you're not allowed to proselytize. We're not looking for converts. So he's not proselytizing. He's teaching them to believe in one God. He's not convincing them to be Jewish. If he's doing that, it's a problem. Because that's after Torah's giving. Not allowed to proselytize. Right? Again, people can say what they want. Yeah, say what they want about me. That's further thing than what I do. People want information. I'll give them information. They make their own choice. Not my choice. Someone asked a major question here. Is there a definite way to know whether an individual is forgiven or absolved of his or her transgressions? No. You don't know for sure. You do whatever you need to do. You don't want to be OCD over here. Obsessive compulsive over here. You go through the proper channels of repentance. You say you're never going to do it again. You make a plan how you're not going to do it again. And all that. Some things you may have to go through Yom Kippur, etc. And that's it. Do you know 100%? Nothing's 100%, except death and taxes. Not necessarily in that order. Right? So we don't know 100%. I wouldn't say we know 100%. Right? But if we do the right thing, what we're supposed to do I have to rethink it and say, maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have done the other thing. No, I don't have to worry about it. You go through the proper channels. You do what you do. You move on. Right? You live in the past. You have no future. You don't want to overthink. You don't want to overthink. If you know for sure you didn't do it good enough, okay. But you don't drive yourself nuts. Right? That's one thing. You don't drive yourself nuts. With it. Somebody asks, is it considered as envy when you say to someone, for example, you have a beautiful house? No. You can compliment someone on that. It's not a problem. Right? Saying someone's got a beautiful house, okay. They have a nice car, this and that. You do have to be careful in the sense that, you don't want to, you don't want to try and convince yourself, wow, I wish I had that. Or I wish I could get that, or whatever. That you don't want to go that far. Right? But to say they have a nice thing, that's not, that's not necessarily coveting. That's not necessarily coveting per se. I wouldn't say that by any stretch. It's okay. That would be okay. Someone mentioned the Nazis were into the occult. Okay. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I don't know if that changes anything, but people get caught up in all kinds of things, then they're convinced to do certain things. Okay. Don't make it any better. The purpose of creation of Amalek was to be destroyed? No. There came a people, they one of the things by Amalek was that they fought against the Jewish people, and the Jewish people at the highest level. At the highest level. So if they're at the highest level, why does it say by Yisro that, he only mentioned about splitting the sea in Amalek? Why Amalek? What about all the other miracles? Everyone else knew about all the other miracles. They say because Amalek came to fight against the Jewish people when the Jewish people were on a tremendous role. Extremely successful, decimated Egypt. Were they fighting against the Jewish people? Right? So these people came along. but they had a certain world outlook, against God. Does God want these people? They created for that? No. Everybody has free choice. Remember, everybody has free choice to make whatever decision they want. Did God know there's going to be people such as Amalek? Sure. Did he want them to be like Amalek? No. But they had free choice. They're not, the purpose of them was not to be destroyed. That wasn't their purpose. They could have done other great things in the world, but they didn't. So because of what they did, they got punished. Not that they're created for that. Someone here mentions we're not allowed to regret a mitzvah, right? God forbid a person should say they regret any mitzvah they've done. Very true. Because then you lose everything. Can we regret attempting a mitzvah that led to some sinning or desecrating Hashem? In other words, someone's doing kiruv, doing outreach, gave someone a siddur, they damaged it. Disrespected it. Should we regret giving it to them? Interesting. You can regret the fact of what happened. In other words, the fact that you gave this prayer book to someone and they messed it up, right? You can regret that, but regretting the mitzvah is a different thing, right? The question is going to be if it's really, if you attempted a mitzvah, and the mitzvah itself, you didn't know it was going to lead to something bad. I'll tell you a story. I'm not going to tell you the details, but, I'll tell you a story that just happened to me. So someone commented, I made this trip to the States, I said, wow, it's such a great thing. Did a great job being there, whatever. And then it's made, a backhanded comment at the same time. Totally backhanded comment at the same time. So you're going to say, but what about the good I did? I did a lot of good. I got an A+. I gave myself an A+. All right, an A+ on this trip. Okay. Very good. Now someone makes a backhanded comment. So what happened to my A+? Right? Do I say because I did all the right things and everything I was supposed to do, now you're going to take that back and nullify it because of something else? No. Right? You don't have to worry about that. If it's something, let's say you did something and directly caused this desecration of God's name, that's a different issue. That's a different issue. This isn't necessarily desecration of God's name over here. Right? If you had the right intention, something happened afterwards, no. You don't regret that. You don't necessarily regret that. It depends. It depends on how it happens. It'll depend. It'll depend how it happened and what the circumstances are. But in general, no. That's not a desecration of God's name in this case. If this person in general could damage things, yeah, then there'll be a problem. Because then you're negligent. Not necessarily desecration of God's name, but you're negligent. You gave somebody something they couldn't handle. They couldn't take care of. So yeah, you did a mitzvah, but at the same time, you made a big mistake. Giving something to somebody that they can't take care of. Does that negate what you did? No, doesn't negate it. Definitely doesn't negate it. Right? That's what I would say. No high's permitted to kiss the scroll. Yeah. No one's allowed to kiss the Torah scroll. Not a problem. Who are the Druids? I don't know. Man, it sounds like witchcraft. The Druids are not the Druze. Druids are ancient Britons. Very good. Right. Occultist wizards. That's what, yeah. Druids, that's what I thought also. Are definitely wizards. Right. Nothing to do with Druze. Right. True. Someone compliments you about your home. Even if God gave it to you. True. God gives us everything. So a person has a beautiful home, nothing to be ashamed of. The only question is if you made it too ostentatious. Person made it too ostentatious, different issue. Then you're showing off what you have. That you don't want to do. That for sure you don't want to do. Right. Someone here points out something's modest, not extravagant, right? Right, because that can give you that can give a person an evil eye. People can be jealous, right? You don't want to do that. You want to be very careful. Even Even if you have a nice home, do not be ostentatious, do not be extravagant, because then it's going to bring a lot of bad things to you. Someone points out, very good, the difference between reaching out to Gentiles to convert is teaching the truth, right? Right. In other words, teaching the truth, giving information, it's not converting people. I had someone tell me in the States, had a conversation with somebody, and they're like, don't convert him. Don't make him a fanatic like you. It's like, okay, I'll try my best. Right. So, no, if you're educating people about the truth, that's not converting people. Definitely not converting people. Someone imagines the plan for Esav and Yaakov would be fathers of 6 tribes each. Yeah. Start of the Jewish nation, right? Also brought down that, but Esav went, as you mentioned, Esav went a totally different path. True. He could have been something, it's brought down. I already said this many times. Esav could have been 100 times, 1,000 times greater than Yaakov in many ways. It's hard to imagine. Like 1,000 times greater. You say, okay, it's an exaggeration, maybe. Right? 1,000 times greater. But what happened? Even with all that, what happened? He got destroyed by his evil inclination. That's how far the evil inclination goes. Right? He lost the opportunity, blew it 100%. I'm going to stop here. I just every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or you can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a good middle of the day or beginning of the day.